My guest tonight is Pierce Redmond. He is the proprietor of Porkins Policy Review. That's porkinspolicyreview.com. Pierce, how are you doing tonight?
Very good, Tim. Very good. No, we had some technical difficulties, but I'm glad that we're talking.
Yes, I think everything is fine now. See if it holds up. Now, you run a couple shows over there. One is one is CA in Hollywood. You do with Tom Secker, which I want to talk about, but also you do a segment on the Great Game.
Yeah, so I do a bunch of different podcasts, and one of them is Porkins Great Game that I do with my good friend Christoph Gehrman, who runs the website New Great Game. Blogspot. Well, I guess it's called the New Great Game blog. It's christophgehrman.blogspot.com. But that is a weekly blog that he does, although he hasn't been doing it quite as much because he's been very busy. But Christoph he's a geopolitical analyst and a researcher out in Germany, and he runs this blog called the New Great Game Roundup, which essentially breaks down all of the interesting geopolitics that are going on in Central Asia, the Caucasus, pipeline politics, NATO, Russia, all of those sort of things, terrorism, quite a bit on the so-called war on terrorism. And we decided to do a podcast series. So we do a monthly show where we generally pick about three major topics that are interesting or that we think are going to be interesting, things that are going to sort of carry on throughout the foreseeable future, dealing with Central Asia, the Caucasus, the global war on terror, and we've been able to thus far kind of continue with a couple of major themes throughout the whole series. So we've been doing it now for quite a while, and a lot of the things that we started talking about years ago have, of course, become very relevant today. So things like the violence in northern Afghanistan that is spilling over. There's quite a bit of crossover between the violence in northern Afghanistan and the surrounding Central Asian countries. So particularly Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, places like Faryab province, Shozan province, Badakhshan, which also borders China. We've talked a lot about Georgia's desires to be part of NATO. We talk a lot about Turkey as well, the influence that Turkey has within Central Asia, and of course Central Asia are mostly all Turkic speaking. So there's a very heavy link between Turkey and the politics of Turkey and politics of Turkish NATO relations and how that translates into Central Asia. So we do that every month. It's a really fun series. We were just talking before we were off air about that, and if you things like color revolutions, drug trafficking, global terrorism, all of these things that we hear a lot about in the alternative media are all, just happening on an everyday level in, the Stan countries, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia. This is the sort of breeding ground for all of these things. So if your people are interested in understanding, say what's going on in Syria or even in Ukraine, then check out the podcast.
Yes, yeah. And of course, you mentioned the drug trade, heroin. Of course, in Vietnam, there was the Golden Triangle, which explained much about that conflict. And you have the Golden Crescent.
Yes.
And the heroin trafficking that's coming out of Afghanistan. And, right after World War II, you've had, the Corsican connection, the Marseilles, and that was instrumental in establishing at least NATO immediately after World War II, because you've had the Luciano Project. I said that goes back into World War II. So the drug trafficking and the establishment of intelligence operations.
Oh yeah, they're all and organized crime as well. All three of those
all linked together.
Very very interconnected.
Yeah, so that's all. Yeah, and organized crime, intelligence, and Hollywood.
Yes.
Which brings us to your other show, CIA in Hollywood, that you do with Tom Secker, who's out of the UK, and he's a great researcher over there. He's done a lot of work. I think this is your second season, right, on this?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the second season. We try to do the CIA in Hollywood series. We do as a season, so we record all the episodes at once. Although it takes a lot longer than we always anticipate, but we record them all at once. generally speaking, we try to bookend each season. So the first episode, we try to make a sort of an older historical episode. So, for instance, in season 1, we took a look at the influence of, or the connection between CIA films and George Orwell. So, of course, we talked about all the way back when the sort of birth of this desire or this trend within the CIA to influence Hollywood directly starts when E. Howard Hunt buys the film rights to both Animal Farm in 1984, and the CIA produced very interesting versions of those movies. Animal Farm was an animated version, and it's actually quite a good film. It's not Orwell's book. The ending is changed, but the animation is amazing. It was done by Hallison Batchelor, which is a very famous animation house in the United Kingdom. Gorgeous looking film. Really interesting, and then we pick a different film and we pick a guest and we sort of dissect the relationship. So the first season was a bit more kind of straightforward. We focused a lot on Chase Brandon, who was the first official Hollywood CIA liaison. So he's a former clandestine operative, very bizarre, mysterious character involved in a lot of dirty stuff behind the scenes. And in the mid-1990s, he actually went out to Hollywood to set up shop for the CIA. Whereas this season, we kind of took a slightly different approach. We sort of expanded out the idea. We included things that, like the Pentagon's involvement. And we also picked a lot of films that may not have necessarily had a concrete connection. For the most part, a lot of the films in the first season, it was documented. You know, you had Milt Bearden on the set advising Tom Hanks in, say, Charlie Wilson's War, or you had a Chase Brandon on the set of Meet the Parents advising Robert De Niro on how to act as a CIA agent. Whereas in the second season, we kind of expanded it out. We talked a lot about George Clooney and his desire to want to work for the CIA, and how a lot of his films in his early years, the ones that sort of put him on the map. And I got a fire truck right out my window. A lot of the films that sort of put him on the map were all sort of him kind of, we thought, auditioning to be in the CIA. But it's an interesting series. It's and Tom and I have covered the relationship between not only the CIA, but sort of the intelligence service as a whole, and their relationship with cinema, with popular culture. So we always cover the show Homeland, which is the CIA's premier television show right now. And this stars Claire Danes and Manny Patinkin, F. Murray Abraham, and we actually this year, the previous season, we actually did an episode by episode one, so that was pretty epic. And we got to meet the infamous Homeland hackers, these artists who were tasked with creating the graffiti for what was supposed to be a Lebanese refugee camp. And they, of course, put all this stuff about how Homeland is racist and, all this funny and they got away with it. But we cover, we've, of course, covered things like Eyes Wide Shut, the sort of classic conspiracy films. But we are very interested in the relationship between these organizations and how they are able to not only influence culture, but really, truly create culture, to change people's perspectives on not only necessarily world events, but on just the mere perception of the CIA. So at times, the CIA is very obsessed with portraying themselves as a dangerous organization, one that should be feared, one that does horrific things, but you kind of want them around because those other guys are even more horrific. At times, the CIA is interested in obscuring their role in a particular event or a particular moment in time. And we see that with things like The Social Network, which is about the creation of Facebook. and the CIA is essentially airbrushed out of that whole discussion. At all the key moments when they were dumping a lot of money into this little known company out in Palo Alto.
Is that In-Q-Tel? And
yeah, In-Q-Tel and Accel Partners, Greylock Partners. These are big VC firms out there, all of which with former board members of In-Q-Tel. Of course, Peter Thiel, who founded Palantir just before he invests in Facebook.
Bilderberger. Huh?
Oh yeah, Bilderberger, and everything in between with Peter Thiel. It's an interesting series. I think we're gonna kind of maybe take a break from it. It is very time consuming. We have some interesting ideas for how to kind of bring in a different audience to this whole concept, because it gets a marginal amount of play. People are aware that the Pentagon and even the CIA, to a lesser degree, are involved in Hollywood, but I don't think they're quite. At times, it's very difficult to convince people that it's a negative thing, that they're going beyond perhaps portraying the military in a positive light. What the CIA does is much more insidious, because they're doing they're also producing or they're involved in films that are actually quite good. We don't hate all of the films that we review or that we look at. But they're doing something that's very different as opposed to things like the FBI or the Pentagon. That's what's dangerous. Even with things like, people are very aware of Zero Dark 30. They're very aware that the CIA was involved. But even that is we cover that in an episode that'll come out in about a week or two. But there are some serious questions about that movie and the time at which it came out, and was this entire movie just one big beyond a propaganda film in the hoorah, we got bin Laden, but was this entire film created to essentially just propagate a myth? So that's a very and again, are we seeing a new generation of filmmakers and actors whose careers are predicated on the fact that they are, forming some sort of unholy alliance with what is probably one of the most nefarious groups out there? And do you necessarily want your families, your children, your friends, your loved ones to grow up in a society where you have this nefarious group that sells drugs, that sells women, children, men, that kills people all over the world? Should they really be in charge of creating our culture, of shaping our culture? And it's getting to a point now where, the Pentagon is, they're involved in things like cupcake wars. They're involved in so much, the scope of which is mind-numbing. I don't think people are quite aware of the degree to which the Pentagon alone is involved in almost everything. Anytime you turn on the TV, especially the History Channel, Discovery, TLC, all those things, there is a Pentagon official that at the very least is interested in why this show is so popular and how can we kind of get into this. And for instance, and I know I've been talking for a while, Tim, and I'll throw it back to you, but there's a couple of documents that Tom acquired that are up on his website, and a lot of them are the ones in particular I'm talking about deal with internal Pentagon documents dealing with or talking about the films and TV shows and things that they are involved in. Now, one of these documents, if you search them, and I'll try and give you some links so you maybe put them up on your site or something. But they specifically talk about what they call, I think it's called public outreach, where the Pentagon will do stuff within the entertainment industry that is supposed to, make the Pentagon look cooler or make them seem more efficient, whatever. They also, in some of these, talk about these not secret meetings, but private meetings that they held with William Morris Endeavor, which is the biggest management agency in Hollywood. They represent everybody. Anyone who's ever seen the Larry Sanders Show, Bob Odenkirk's character, he plays Gary Shandling or Larry Sanders. He plays his agent. That's based on Ari Emanuel, who runs William Morris Endeavor. People might know Jeremy Piven ripped off Bob Odenkirk's character when he did Entourage. That's based on him. They represent everybody. They were involved in private meetings with the Pentagon, and by the Pentagon's own admission, these meetings were about trying to figure out a way for the Pentagon to become involved in films and TV shows at a developmental level, where they could alter the script, they could shape the outcome and the messages of movies well before. Now it's sort of you have a script and you need an aircraft carrier, you give it to the Pentagon office in Hollywood. They say, oh, take this out, take that out. Okay, you do that, and then you get your aircraft carrier. The Pentagon is now very interested in getting involved well before that. So they don't even have to tell you to take it out because they're going to just rewrite the whole script. So that's a very scary thing. I don't think that anybody is really in favor. I can't really find anybody that's actually in favor of this, that thinks this is a good idea, or just the mere fact that they're wasting God only knows how much money doing this. There's never, again, the CIA's own internal reports. The Inspector General's reports on the CIA's role in the entertainment industry, some of which we've Tom has gotten through FOIA. A lot of these, they have no idea internally, the CIA is claiming, of how much money they're spending on this, the level to which this is going on. Admittedly, they don't even know. So that's a troubling thing also. Do they need to be this involved? And ultimately, what is their goal? Because I don't think their goal is just making great pictures for me and you.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is when we say CIA, a lot of people think, well, this is a government agency, and you're thinking this one government agency is going to have this much influence. But we're not just talking about CIA, because when you're talking about CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, you have to talk about the forces and influences and interests that went into creating it, and that was largely, Wall Street, the big banks, the financial interests that had developed in the decades prior, basically with big oil and narcotics trafficking. So the origins of the intelligence agency in the United States is narcotics and oil. You could also make the same claim regarding MI6 and British intelligence was, the opium trade.
Oh, sure.
And the financial interests that developed out of that, which became the banking interests, which became, basically Wall Street or the City of London. So these are the interests that this is. CIA is an agency, therefore it's acting on someone's behalf, and these are the interests the agency really acts for. These, when we talk about that is often the CIA can influence these things. The intelligence community, the entities that the oligarchs, more or less, I guess you could say, who want to control culture, because the way you control the political, you control the pre-political, which is the culture. And an example of this that I came across was the development of the black exploitation films of the 1970s. And this was developed by MGM, but the head of MGM was a CIA asset. And he worked with Gordon Parks, who was a Time Life photographer who played a part in infiltrating the Black Panther movement by taking pictures of him because he was black. So he worked for Time Life, of course, which was part of the Henry Luce empire, which is Skull and Bones, which goes back to CIA. And so this publishing empire, which is, you could say, was CIA tied, to the intelligence community through Skull and Bones, which created the CIA. He developed these films, and the job was to promote criminal and sexual irresponsible behavior in the black community through these films. And this gets into what your talk was regarding some of these Hollywood's objective, or CIA's role in Hollywood, is cultural degradation.
Oh, no, definitely.
Yeah, but my point is that although you could look at who's involved in this, Gordon Parks, MGM, Time Life, people wouldn't say that's CIA. I would say these are the powers behind CIA, and that they overlap. It isn't just the agency. It isn't Langley. It isn't, that's why they have front companies and things like Air America or Civil Air Transport.
Yeah.
Or Brewster Jennings, right?
Or a lot of these production companies in Hollywood.
Yes.
I would argue some of them, things like Participant Media is a big one that seems to produce every well-known CIA-assisted film. You've got the head of Participant is a former eBay executive.
Yeah.
Very close with the whole PayPal mafia, all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, the overlap. And if you were to launder money somewhere, Hollywood is a great place.
Well, that's another thing, yeah, because you can just dump all this money into a bad movie. You can have like 5 sequels to Leprechaun.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And again, too, if you're trying to make a movie, and some guy comes here, here's $5 million. Oh, no questions asked. I don't care who you are. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You know,
that was the thing with the Cotton Club murders, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Definitely. And it was just funny you're talking there, Tim, about the blaxploitation, and that reminded me back in the, I want to say like the early 1950s, 1952, 1953, there was a guy who was head of domestic and foreign censorship at Paramount called Luigi Larashi, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He was a CIA asset for the Psychological Strategy Board. And interestingly, back then, he was he was known in subsequently came out in letters that he wrote that he was very into quote replacing quote well-dressed Negroes in films in some vain attempt to show we're not racist, especially in Hollywood. And he was also did a lot of things sort of basically airbrushing out that the U.S. had done anything terrible to the Indians who used to live here. So that was one level, and it's interesting to see. You go from that to then blaxploitation. It's sort of like what's going on here. But the degradation is that is happening, I think, more and more in just all films. It's part of some sort of dumbing down the population.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's happening in academia. It's happening in entertainment, music in general. The dumbing down of music, and of course, you get that with this auto tuning.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that gets into transhumanism.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say CIA or MGM or ExxonMobil or J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs, it's almost semantic, really, because these interests all intertwined. And the CIA really works for Wall Street and the City of London. The same, you could say the same thing about MI6. This is the Anglosphere, the financial domination of the planet, the Western oligarchs. This is why, again, when you're involved in movies, and more people watch movies and read now. One other point, I listened to your podcast regarding The Quiet American.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing in the Graham Greene novel, I believe you mentioned that the person is recruited by like the Center for the Arts and something.
In the novel, Pyle is recruited by some sort of oh God, what is it called? It's like something like the Free Asia, committee or something like that. I'm
confusing. I'm sorry. It was the Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
Okay.
He was Chuck Barris.
Yes.
Was recruited. He answered an ad saying, "What, unemployed college student?"
Oh yeah. Well, according to in the book, he answers an ad for an unemployed I think it's a college graduate free to travel. That he sees in an old ad in an NYU newspaper, and he goes to some place supposedly on Washington Square South called the North American Center for the Arts.
See, that's very typical of an intelligence front.
Yeah.
Yeah, of arts. I mean, that's when you talk about these production houses that they go, that are just fronts, and they're used for laundering money or producing something, and they fold, and new ones created.
Well, that's what's interesting with Chuck Barris in his own book. He first off, he refers to the CIA training ground as the farm, which is the earliest reference ever to that. The first time that the farm became sort of a term synonymous with the CIA was much later in The Recruit. It's very heavily, basically written by Chase Brandon, that film. But apparently Chuck Barris was using this back in the 80s. And he also talks he's much more explicit in the book about that he spied on a Malcolm X cell, that he infiltrated civil rights groups, that he later moved to LA to spy on student groups and to infiltrate the media. And all of this is kind of basically glossed over, interestingly, by Clooney. And instead, Clooney has a whole sequence where he's at the farm, and who are his buddies there? It's none other than Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. It's very bizarre. I don't know who Clooney is trying to appeal to with that. I think it's probably people like us, which is interesting in and of itself. But and again, talking about the destruction of morals and society and the dumbing down of the population, Chuck Barris is the master of that.
The Gong Show, yeah.
Yeah, the Gong Show.
And the Gong Show ran in the afternoon. It was syndicated, but it ran like in the middle of the afternoon, if I recall. I remember when it was on. I remember watching it when it was on in the late 70s. And you mentioned they had, they're like, kind of like pedophilic imagery or messages in it. And
yeah, there's a film with the Popsicle Twins.
Yeah.
The famous one that really, I mean, you couldn't even get away with that nowadays, which is crazy that he was able to do that then. And of course, Chuck Barris is all, but the Gong Show is better than things like American Idol and blah, blah, blah. And it's, if anything, the Gong Show is even worse than these things.
Yeah, yeah. He also,
nostalgia seems to cloud everybody's minds.
He also put on, like the dating game or the newlywed game, things like that.
Oh, yeah, dating game, newlywed game. He had a show called Operation Entertainment, which was sponsored by the DoD at one point.
And you mentioned why the Pentagon's involvement in all this, in either producing these shows or gauging how people respond to these shows. Well, it's all part of their psychological warfare, office.
Yeah, and I think they also just they like having people in a constant state of competition. That's why they're very involved in a lot of these, cooking shows,
Cutthroat Kitchen,
Survivor, Cupcake Wars. They like people fighting one another. They like the I just had Robbie Martin on my show to talk about his film series, A Very Heavy Agenda. And he talks about the neocons, and that's really what the neocons don't have any actual ideology. They just want everybody angry. They want everybody in a constant state of perpetual warfare. And I think that's why the Pentagon is so involved in really asinine shows out there. Like who really cares about ice road truckers? But apparently the Pentagon does, in so much as I think it feeds into this inert animal instinct within a lot of people. I think particularly Americans have been coaxed into having this, again, that hoorah, we got to defeat we got to be number one no matter what. And they love that. So they kind of push that in a lot of the shows they get involved with.
Mm-hmm. And it's also true with you've seen that with professional sports, how they've become heavily militarized,
Oh, you can't watch a football game anymore without it. It's basically just one long Pentagon ad.
Yeah, and sprinkled with Viagra ads and
right.
Right. Bikini,
all with young guys who don't even need Viagra.
There's always some like right. Really buff 40-year-old with
and even younger wife,
a little gray hair. But he has a muscle car.
Right.
And his wife is a respectable 32 years old.
Mm-hmm. And apparently they all have bathtubs out in the open.
It's like the Fall Guy, right?
Right.
They all have bathtubs overlooking the desert.
Yeah, I know. It's wonderful. I'd love to land a Viagra commercial sometime.
So all this is psychological warfare, and if you wonder why it's so sinister and so perverse, one of the people that wrote Psychological Warfare Doctrine for the Pentagon was, of course, Colonel Michael Aquino, who who's an avowed Satanist,
pedophile, probably.
Pedophile who has been tied to cases like the Johnny Gosch case, the Presidio cases, and this gets into organized pedophilia, which also ties back to the intelligence operations, because they're big into human trafficking, and also groups that engage in human trafficking, all these, either these drug gangs or these satanic groups that, according to some people's research, are assets for various intelligence agencies because, well, they kind of get the mission done. There was the you familiar with remember that FBI guy? What was his name? Fails me now. He investigated the McMartin.
Damn. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Passed away a couple years ago.
Yes. Oh God, what's his name? I know he's on the tip of my tongue. I know exactly who you mean, though. Yeah.
Well, when he was investigating, he had a case called the Finders case. Do you recall the details of that?
Vaguely. I know a little bit about the Finders.
Yeah.
Very mysterious group.
Yeah, they had these kids in a van in Florida, and the local authorities found these kids all disheveled, underwear, just wearing up. Well, they did their due diligence. They investigated the case. And they traced it up to Washington D.C. And there was a warehouse in D.C. that had all types of like telex machines, state of the art for the late '80s, early '90s. And it was being investigated, I think, by the FBI, and the Justice Department shut down the investigation on the request of the CIA because it was a national security issue.
Right, that's right.
Well, these kids are being trafficked, and that can be done either for favors or for blackmail. And this is why these things. That explains partially why these things go down. Same thing with the Nebraska. The
Franklin cover-up.
Franklin cover-up.
Sure.
And not only that, it also got into perhaps some of the savings and loan scandals that were linked to Iran-Contra, because what happened was a lot of these banks were being used by the mob and by not just CIA, but the Iran-Contra, the enterprise that they established to illegally fund the Contras with cocaine. And, well, basically these savings and loans are being raided. They're like little BCCIs all over the country. And this also likely involved the Franklin Credit Union, because remember, some $40 million went missing. There was a huge amount of money for the small operation that it was.
Yeah, I know where'd they get that.
And so one of the reasons why perhaps that investigation was shut, not only because it linked to these high political figures, into the Bush administration at the time, but also would have gotten into the seedier side of Iran-Contra. So the investigation has to be squashed. And when you look into these things, you start to open up a can of worms and realize how all these things are connected. And then it gets into the blackmail operation in Washington D.C. How Craig Spence, what was this GOP lobbyist who had this house or his mansion in D.C. that was wired for audiovisual. And this also, of course, you've done a lot of work with the Epstein case.
Oh yeah.
Which there's a lot that suggests that it's some sort of Mossad CIA operation.
Yeah, there is a bizarre Israeli connection that I haven't been able to really piece together entirely. There are definitely some. I mean, there's obviously the Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was involved with something with the Mossad. But there is, Ehud Barak is rarely mentioned, but he did fly around on Epstein's plane. There is some other stuff, more bizarre stuff in the background of all of that. I might make a little sense because Mossad has certainly had something against Bill Clinton. I don't know what exactly. But the Clintons were always paranoid that Mossad was wiretapping them.
Yeah, that goes back to
Lewinsky. Yeah. So I don't know what quite there. I think Epstein was. I think if I had to sort of make a quick guess, I think Epstein was some sort of CIA asset. Someone of that level had to have been. He had to have been known. His services definitely were being utilized by people. I mean, Virginia Roberts herself has stated on the record numerous times that she had to, after she was forced to have sex with someone, say an Alan Dershowitz or Prince Andrew or who knows who else, she was then debriefed by Epstein. He wanted to know everything about, what did they say, what did they look like, what happened when you were having sex, all of those sort of things. So he more or less insinuated that to Virginia Roberts when they were down in St. Thomas, that he had something on Bill Clinton, and that's why Clinton was there. Not so much. But although that is my opinion on that has changed a bit because it's just come to light with some new documents that Epstein was very involved in helping to found the Clinton Foundation. So his connection with Clinton might be. I always thought it was more of a give and take relationship, but it might be more than that. I'm not sure.
Oh, Gunderson, by the way, was the FBI agent.
Yes, Ted Gunderson. Yes, of course.
Name just came to me. Gunderson, yeah. That's interesting. And of course, the Clinton Foundation.
Well, and that if Epstein was involved with the Clinton, I mean, that one. What the hell was the Clinton Foundation really up to?
Yes.
And there's a whole lot there. I mean, what the Clinton Foundation does in Haiti, and there's a lot of questions. That Epstein's connection to that alone, and that's his own lawyer. That's Gerald Lefcourt writing a letter saying that. So it's a very. I don't think he would make that up. So that's and again, there's always been. I mean, Hillary Clinton had a major fundraiser. This is months ago. In the townhouse right next to Epstein's. So I mean. That alone is just why even be on that block?
Yeah,
you're trying to distance yourself because I mean, according to the Clintons, they don't even know who this guy is. They're even more silent than Trump is, who's up to his eyeballs in Epstein.
Yeah,
but I don't even know why they would even have a fundraiser. I mean, is there no one around you saying, you know what, Hillary, this may not be the best visual for people? But apparently no one really cared because they did it and it was a little tiny blurb, in like the New York Post. That was it.
Well, someone needs to report it. If no one reports it, then it doesn't happen, right? It's like a tree falling in the woods. No one around to hear it.
Right.
Does it make a noise? And so, if politicians are engaged in pedophilic acts and there's no New York Times isn't around to report it, does it really happen?
Yeah. I know.
That's what happened. That's why control of the press is so important. In these things, and it will matter electorally. Of course, when you have both sides implicated, which apparently we do, Trump's not going to talk about it.
Oh, no. I mean, he's, if anything, I mean...
Yeah.
Bill Clinton is obviously a sick creep. I think we all know that. And, you kind of almost expect it from old Bill. I mean, he's not Slick Willie for nothing. But the Trump stuff, I mean, you're talking about decades ago that he was involved with this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of questions about that. How far back does this go? Why is Trump flying around on Epstein's plane? Doesn't he have his own, private jet that he boasts is better than Air Force One? So why is he flying around on Epstein's private jet? I mean, why is Virginia Roberts worked at Mar-a-Lago? Her father worked at Mar-a-Lago. Why is that never addressed? I think even this latest lawsuit involving Trump and a girl that he allegedly raped at a party organized by Epstein or organized by Maxwell, and that Epstein was there. I don't dismiss that completely offhand.
You can't.
No, exactly. And again, even if it's all BS, the mere fact that that's even happening, you have a presidential candidate where that's being alleged, is so wild.
I think that might have been part of the mission of the Lafayette Lewinsky, was to degrade, lower expectations, lower standards. Because when everyone's obsessed with Lewinsky, no one's talking about Mena Airport and the cocaine and which ties to the Bushes and the CIA and Oliver North. No one, I mean, everyone's obsessed with Clinton's perjury and his sexual escapades.
Yes, right, yeah.
But no one's talking about the massive importation of cocaine into Mena Airport, and it's being laundered through the Arkansas Development Agency and Worth and Bank and Morgan Guarantee and Whitewater and all this stuff. All that money is being laundered through those operations down there. So yeah, it's part of we call it a limited hangout or a diversion.
Oh, look who's the big guy in that, Ken Starr, who's now essentially defending Clinton.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of Epstein's biggest, and Ken Starr's really anyone that had still thinks that he's some sort of crusader. This guy just recently went out of his way to, aside from Epstein, he defends other pedophiles.
Yeah.
There's a well-known teacher that taught it his. I think he taught his daughter even. And this guy's been a pedophile. This goes back to the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken Starr, oh no, he's okay. He's a good guy. I mean, nothing ever happened to my kids, so it's not a big deal. But it's interesting again to see that Ken Starr kind of became that I don't know, some sort of crusader, and he was after the truth, and then 20 odd years later or whatever, he's defending Epstein's best friend. He's defending somebody who helped found the Clinton Foundation. So I don't know what's going on there. I think Ken Starr is part of some sort of distractionary or definitely some sort of limited hangout.
The Starr report, appears to be a limited hangout because he did avoid all the evidence concerning Vince Foster and also
I know the Vince Foster stuff is big. Yeah, I know. How do you just avoid that one entirely?
And when you're talking about drugs and smuggling and CIA and strange deaths, Vince Foster could have been killed for any number of reasons. Was he a loose end or somewhere? Was there something going on there? But he quashed that investigation. And of course, Ken Starr himself is a nephew of Cornelius van der Star, who started the insurance company that would become AIG.
Really? I did not know.
Yeah. So
that's an interesting connection there.
And AIG goes back to Asia, insurance, opium, CIA, OSS. I mean, he was CV Starr. Cornelius van der Star was an OSS agent.
Only someone with a name like van der Star.
I know. But there's a reason why Ken Starr would eventually become a judge, and of course, it was Sybil Evans who once telling she was either talking to an FBI agent or recounting the story, where he was doing background checks on people who were appointed to the federal bench. And the FBI agent says that what they do is they do background checks on people, and the people that come out clean don't get appointed. It's the people who are compromised who get appointed.
Because, you always want somebody. Yeah, you always want a little bit of dirt.
Yeah, how do you do business with an honest man?
Yeah, no, right.
I think that's out of The Godfather. An honest man. How do you work with a guy like that? So I mean, if that's the rationale for people rising up the totem pole, so to speak, political, financial, you want people getting who are more compromised, and this might explain why someone like Trump would be compromised at some point. And the way people are compromised is their proclivities or weaknesses are profiled, and then they're catered to, and then they're filmed. And if you get someone drunk on drugs, you get them doing things that they might not otherwise do. And there's also, when you start engaging in this behavior, there's a gradual, you descend into it,
Yeah, it gets more extreme too.
This is part of this, if you part of the eyes wide shut culture.
Yeah, right. No,
there's an addictive quality to it, and where normal people don't. I mean, people who have normal lives and limitations and expectations, this guides their morality because they have to deal with people on equal footing. This shapes the way we deal with people and how we approach people and how I have quality. If you're a billionaire or an oligarch, you never hear the word no.
Yeah, it's not in your vocabulary.
And so you start to treat people. If you're flying around above the earth all the time, you're not even in traffic. You're in a helicopter. You don't have to deal with traffic. It's very easy for you to start look at people as being less than you, or being sub people, and that's where you might get people utilizing people sexually at these parties. It's a psychological effect. Try to understand how people behave this way. It's the mentality of an oligarch.
Oh yeah, and I think just to it's a terrible film, but there's a movie, the Nick Cage movie 8mm, which is all about a snuff film. It's not so bad. I have like a weak spot in my heart for Nick Cage, but that involves this very rich guy who, when he dies, his widow finds his snuff film. Very very brutal snuff film, and it's sort of revealed at the end his lawyer slash guy who kind of facilitates these sort of things. He's asked, why'd you do it, and he just said because he could. Why not? Because he had that level. So that's just logically for them. That's what they do. And of course, I mean, and linking it back with the Hollywood, I mean, pedophilia is just rampant in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, that connection, that layer of all of this, again, it makes you wonder. I have no evidence, but or nothing concrete, but you wonder with some of the actors out there who are they being protected by the CIA? In exchange for making favorable movies. I don't know, but it would follow that same sort of line of thinking.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we have the accusations, of Corey Feldman.
Sure, and Corey Haim.
And Corey Haim, who I guess you could say probably led to his death.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we had the movie last year, Best Picture, Spotlight, about the scandals within the Catholic Church in the Boston diocese.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still waiting for Hollywood to make a movie about the pedophilia in Hollywood.
There was a movie that it's been essentially censored. I can't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head. But it was made by what's her name, Amy Berg, who also made a movie again about the pedophilia in the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And she made a movie, the same thing about Hollywood, and it just nobody would touch it. She couldn't promote it. It was very difficult for any theaters to play it. It's very difficult to even get a hold of it now. And this was during the time she interviewed people that were claiming that Bryan Singer, who's the director of X-Men, that Singer was involved in this, and she apparently had a bunch of guys with pretty credible accounts that Singer was involved in this, and he was at these parties. It was coke everywhere and young boys and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, Hollywood is, it's funny. Lincoln, Hollywood and Epstein and pedophilia and all these things. Of course, one of Epstein's good friends is Woody Allen. And when you bring up Woody Allen, and I remember me and my sister, we got into an argument with a friend of ours at a party, and they're talking about, I like Woody Allen. And it's just, I mean, there's just no denying that he's a creepy guy.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get him hanging around with Epstein. And my sister made the point, what is the plot of Manhattan, the movie? I mean, he's in love with this little girl,
Yeah.
And that's considered a great art, whatever. I mean, the same thing with Roman Polanski. It's sort of, she wanted it. Why was she there?
Yeah.
And it's just that weird mentality, especially when it comes to girls that are molested or raped by people that are powerful. The same thing, Epstein's victims get that all the time. Well, you got gifts. You got to fly around. So what's the big deal if you get violated by Donald Trump and Epstein at a party in New York City? He gave you $200 afterwards.
Yeah. That's their vision of. That's the type of world they want, though.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to your kind of just lowering of expectations for people. Now it is like. I mean, I get into arguments all the time with these Trump supporters, and it's like unless Trump rapes somebody in front of them, and even then they'll come up with some sort of mental gymnastics to excuse it. Or again, his first wife, back when they were filing for divorce, said that he raped her, and then he basically silenced her. Got her to sign this non-disclosure agreement and in the divorce payout, and she said, "Oh well, I didn't really mean rape when I said that." But this guy's running to be president.
Yeah, well,
No, and then of course on the other side you get Hillary Clinton, who might even be worse.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like
again, lowering of expectations.
Yes, it's And of course, we had Lyndon Johnson in the White House.
Yeah, no, I know.
He was pretty bad too.
Mm. Well, both Bushes, Mr.
Yeah,
Cocaine.
yeah. That's one of these things. People don't associate the Bush family. Generally speaking, people don't think the Bush family as they see Bush as being kind of mild-mannered and nerdy, northeastern.
Yes.
And according to Chip Tatum, if he's to be believed, he's one of the most evil men around.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, if you do the research, his connection to Operation 40 and
And Prescott Bush and the whole the business plot with the Smedley Butler and Nazis and cocaine. No, I don't think you can really think of a worse family. I know it's sad that, I mean, even that, it's like, I even find myself like, I could go for a little George W. right now. You know, at least he knew how to have a good time.
Yeah.
Which is really, again, that's a scary thing when the you can be convinced that, again, talking about nostalgic for the George W. Bush administration, just filled with all these psychotic neocons. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, at least we knew where we stood with them.
Well, they go way back into the small arms company that was it George Walker, or was it Bush? I forget who it was.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
And he was keyed into the war, one of the wartime agents, First World War, and he made millions of dollars off that war.
Mm-hmm.
And so he could be part of the merchants of death. And so they parlay that fortune into greater fortunes, and they consolidate during World War II. That's what Prescott Bush was doing with these business dealings, with Fritz Thyssen, and of course the Rockefellers were providing aviation fuel to the German Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Ford and General Motors were supplying vehicles to the German Army, and also to the Russians. And of course, Anthony Sutton's research regarding the trucks that are being built for the Soviets that are supplying the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. So they're just making money off both sides in these wars.
Oh yeah. I mean, they have no scruples about anything. So
yeah, and so it's almost like they go around, they foment a civil war here that creates conditions that are ripe for the drug trade, human trafficking. Because what happens when you destabilize the society? Men turn to drug dealing, women turn to prostitution. That's one of the sad realities of war. So if you intensify or increase the wars around the world, you increase business opportunities.
Mm. Oh, and then you set up some movie theaters. You start pumping in Hollywood films.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's kind of what the Third Man was kind of about that in post-war.
Right, yeah. One of my favorite movies.
Drugs, prostitution, all this stuff. And of course it comes home because you have the domestic drug trade and human trafficking here, which we alluded to earlier, which ties in intelligence and is all tied together. It's sad, but again, these are the people, as you said, that are involved in producing Hollywood, the films that we watch that form our expectations of what good life is and
is this who we want?
Yeah. So it's a great series, and I highly recommend it. Because again, you provide you dissect these movies and provide a critical analysis you don't find anywhere else. And you do, obviously, you and Tom and whoever guest you invite must spend a lot of time doing it.
Yeah, it's a time-consuming show.
And it's also great if you want to get an idea of what movies you might want to interested in watching or rewatch. Because a couple of these movies I would like to rewatch, like The Quiet American, which I saw the 2002 version. Which I agree with you. I thought that was better.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and the Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I got to watch it again after you two talk about it. So, of course, when I saw it, 8-9 years ago, I wasn't quite as keen or privy to some of these things. So.
It would have gone over my head too back then. Yeah.
So. Anyway, great show. Now, you also have done a number of interviews with one author, Steven Singular. He is sort of a true crime reporter, journalist, who, at least to my estimations, are the ones that really get to the truth of a lot of these cases, because you really can't rely on the mainstream media or the authorities to get to the truth of these stories. But he did a book on the OJ trial.
Yes, he wrote a book called Legacy of Deception, which it deals with his own experiences within the trial. He was he wrote a book back in the late 80s, I want to say is when it came out, called Talk to Death, which was about Alan Berg, who was a very popular left-wing radio DJ out in Colorado, who was murdered by a very bizarre, secretive neo-Nazi group called the Order. And he wrote a whole book about that. Oliver Stone later sort of, I think, kind of ripped off Stephen and made a movie about Alan Berg and about Stephen's writing. But anyway, when the O.J. Simpson trial happened and it became this huge national story everywhere, Stephen was actually contacted by a source within probably within the LAPD, but within the law enforcement within Los Angeles. And Stephen has never named who this person is, obviously. And this source told Stephen that there is a connection between the O.J. Simpson case, particularly Mark Fuhrman, and this neo-Nazi group that you were talking about. I know your writing. I know your stuff. There's a connection between all of this. And at first, Stephen sort of thought, the hell is this guy talking about? You know, he's told me many times when that happened, you know, I just finished writing this book about neo-Nazis and all this crazy stuff. I didn't really want to get involved in any more Nazi stuff. But he ended up listening to this source. He ended up, the source providing him some very interesting inside information. And Stephen actually brought this eventually to the defense team. And almost everything that the defense team later used, which fully acquitted O.J. Simpson, and I do believe that he was acquitted because there was no evidence. All of that came from Stephen Singular. So people may be familiar with the concept of, or the term EDTA. This is an anticoagulant that's put in blood that is taken as samples by the police. So if you find EDTA in a blood sample at a crime scene, you know it had to have been planted afterwards. That was one of the major turning points in the O.J. Simpson trial, that EDTA was found in not every sample, but every sample that was retested, including by the FBI, at the behest of the prosecution, in order to shut up the defense, and then they couldn't call the FBI to the stand. The defense had EDTA in that. Stephen was also told about a blue bag that was resembled very close to a evidence bag used by the LAPD. That there was a bag that was also found near some of the key evidence, including the mysterious gloves. That bag was in evidence, or was documented. That came up in the case, that there was this bag. There was a stick that was used that came from Nicole's back fence that somehow made its way over to OJ's house in Rockingham. That came up later on. There are a lot of other. I mean, at one point, Stephen's book proposal got leaked out by the Michael Vinner, who is a publisher at Dove Publishing. When Stephen handed in the book proposal, he freaked out and thought, "Oh my God, there's so much explosive information in this. I got to do something." That ended up on the desk of Judge Ito. The case had to stop so they could read this book proposal. Christopher Darden himself, one of the lead prosecutors, devotes several pages of his own book called In Contempt, basically saying that Stephen Singular, that the whole OJ trial, their whole defense strategy was based on Stephen Singular. And he even goes so far as to admit that the evidence that Singular brought forth was Brady material, meaning that OJ was innocent. Now, Darden doesn't go to saying that, yes, there was EDTA, yes, there were numerous other bizarre things going on. You get Van Adder, one of the lead detectives. He's carrying around not only OJ's blood that came out during the initial murder trial, but in the civil trial, he was also carrying around a vial of Nicole Brown Simpson's blood as well as Ronald Goldman's blood. So he's got all three of the principals for several hours unaccounted for. He's walking around with these blood samples. Stephen was also instrumental. He was the first person to really blow the lid off Mark Fuhrman. He talked about Fuhrman's history within the LAPD, talking about... again, what people don't understand that Stephen was very instrumental in opening my eyes to, but also people at the time when he wrote this book, was that Fuhrman was being investigated during the O.J. Simpson trial. He was being and not just that he was being investigated for being a racist or things like that. He was being investigated because of for one thing, painting a swastika on a former officer's locker after this guy in particular had married a Jewish woman. And again, this was Furman's fingerprints were found there, covered up. He was also being investigated because he had openly told several people, other LAPD cops, that Nicole Simpson had a, quote, nice boob job. So, did he know Nicole previously? And this again also falls in line with stuff that Singular was told by his source. Nicole and Furman know each other. There's something more to this. And initially Stephen thought, I don't know about that. Then you get not only that he's being investigated for making these very bizarre comments, but also that other cops said Furman is Nicole's cop on the force. And then again, it comes out that Furman had been over to OJ's house previously. So all of that was going on as well during the trial. But yes, Steven Singular is an amazing guy. It's really one of the pleasures of doing the podcast is getting to know him so well, and for him getting me so interested in the O.J. Simpson trial, because that is really it's so eye-opening. And again, the effects of that trial we are feeling it today more than ever. So there's a lot in there, and there's when people ask me about, but what about this, what about that, I always tell them, because people don't really do this, look at the actual evidence. People have this assumption, but he's guilty. He's the big scary black guy, he did it. He's Othello, basically.
Yes.
In their minds.
So he's also a Moor.
yeah, exactly. He's a Moor, killing this innocent
blonde white woman. Yeah.
Right. And that's not to dismiss. I think OJ did admittedly beat up Nicole. They were involved in some really dark stuff. I don't think OJ's a nice guy. Obviously, he then later went on and wrote this weird book trying to make money off of this is how I would kill my wife, which is really, I don't know what you're doing when you do that. But look at the evidence. Why was there EDTA in the blood? Why was O.J. Simpson's the Bronco was broken into at least twice while it was in the LAPD impound lot? Why did Kelly Muldorfer, who was the officer in charge of investigating the Bronco when it was brought in, why does she say that when it was first brought in, there was nothing inside the car? There was no blood on the console. Why did blood seem to magically reappear weeks later in crime scene photos? Sometimes there wouldn't be any blood, then there would be blood. The whole sock evidence is the blood on the socks, very suspect. Look at the evidence, because you have to keep in mind that this jury had access to nothing else but the facts of this case. They weren't allowed to watch TV. They weren't allowed to read. They couldn't talk to anybody. All they had was the evidence in this case. And yes, race was something of. Race obviously played into this. And Mark Furman is, by his own admission, a genocidal racist. But if you get aside, if you get past some of that, and I think Furman, it's important to understand Furman because there's a larger story in and of that. But looking at the evidence, there's a lot that any normal person, if you were in there, if you didn't know who, if you just had, victim A and B and murderer X, you would acquit murderer X. Take away the fact that he's O.J. Simpson. Just look at the evidence. And then of course, there's a whole lot more since then that's come out. There's a whole question of releasing Nicole Brown's phone records. There's a lot of evidence that points that Nicole might have been on the phone with her mother at the same time that O.J. Simpson was driving to LAX. Nicole's actual phone records were never entered into the trial. Instead, a picture alleging to be her phone records was taken, and that was put on a poster board, and that was entered into the trial as Exhibit 35. Now, her actual phone records were never entered, and there was originally on the original coroner's report done by Dr. Golden, has Lou Brown, her father, saying that Nicole last spoke to her mother, Juditha, at 11 p.m. Then that's changed to 10:30. Then that's later changed again. Then they come up with this, they spoke at about 9:30 or 9:35, because that is the only way you could fit in the prosecution's theory. And there's a whole, with that timeline alone, there's no way that Juditha and Lou Brown could have left Mezzaluna and driven all the way to Santa Monica and gotten on the phone with Nicole. It's just impossible. That is contradicted by a whole bunch of other things. But the real thing is, where are the phone records? Behind closed door meetings, you get Robert Shapiro, who was on OJ's defense, and Marcia Clark for the prosecution. They stipulated to this made-up time as to when the phone calls were actually made. So the jury itself, they never even got to see the phone records. Not that they were ever even introduced. They were only a picture of what is alleging to be the phone records was introduced on a poster board. There's a lot of questions about Ronald Goldman. He has this massive criminal file. His criminal file is still protected under the confidentiality agreement that is awarded to confidential informants in California. So who was he informing on? Why was Ronald Goldman and Nicole, their psychiatrist's office broken into numerous times? And again, this all came out in the trial. That's the other thing too. Almost all the information I'm relaying to you and your listeners right now all came out in either mainstream news outlets or in the trial. But people only see the, Geraldo Rivera losing his stuff over OJ getting off. They only see these sort of sensationalized things where OJ is this evil monster and Nicole and Ronald were angels that were just in love or something. So there's a lot there. I don't know anywhere you want to pick up on that.
Well, okay, so basically you have this blood preservative, this anticoagulant, EDTA, in the blood, which means that the blood that was supposedly found at the crime scene was placed there after the fact. It could not have come from O.J. Simpson when he was committing the crime. So it's planted evidence.
Yes. Okay. Well, and again, O.J. willingly gave his blood up. What guy does this?
Yeah, and this was 8 milliliters, and there's a deficit of 1.5 milliliters.
Yes, yeah, something around there.
Which would suggest that the blood that was planted is the missing from the vial.
Yeah, Van Adder had access to for hours.
So there's no proper chain of custody to this vital piece of evidence.
Yeah, to all three principles.
Yeah. You also, I think, in your talk with Mr. Singular, you mentioned that the original coroner or medical examiner said there were 2 knives used for the killings.
Yeah, Dr. Irwin Golden originally said 2 knives, and there's a lot of other people who have written about this. T.H. Johnson has talked a lot about this, his brother as well. But yeah, Golden said originally 2 knives, and that follows a lot of other. Just logically, the prosecution came up with the most bizarre, that OJ was hiding in the bushes, even though he had a key to Nicole's house, apparently, which they never found. And then he's hiding in the bushes, and then he knocks out Nicole, kills Goldman, who's fighting and struggling, then kills Nicole without a noise being made. No one hears any noises. The only noises that were heard by anybody was Nicole's dog. And there's a whole lot of weird, it's just that's like the major witness is a dog, this Akita, who's called Kato, incidentally.
Yeah.
But Golden said there were 2 knives, which would make more sense that there would be 2 assailants, at least 2, and that also fits in with multiple witnesses that claim to have seen other men leaving that house. Other than yeah, there were several people.
And you have here with Ronald Goldman is confidential informant. I'm going to assume that's something. Let's just say that has something to do with narcotics trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, one can only assume. There's no. Obviously his records are sealed, and they are sealed under the confidential informant, protection clause or whatever. Yeah, and I mean, there's a weird, there's some weird, his stepmother was married. So Goldman's stepmother was married to Marvin Glass, who's a very famous attorney out of Chicago, who was probably, he was the attorney for Colombian drug cartels, very involved in cocaine trafficking. Goldman's father was more or less dating Marvin Glass's wife right after he went to jail. And then they instantly get married. And it is true that Marvin Glass was in. He spent a while in prison, but it sort of turned state's evidence and was able to kind of get out. But he was involved in his state's evidence, turning it. He was involved in one of the largest FBI bribery cases, Operation Greylord, and he was able to sort of skirt this. Anyway, to make a long story short, Marvin Glass, while in prison, gets infected with a needle that had HIV. He actually contracts HIV. He was dying. But he was in Los Angeles at the exact same time as the murders. So not that they're necessarily that he's involved, although it raises some interesting questions, but that was never explored. And you would think, so this guy is randomly, brutally murdered, and his mother, his stepmother's ex-husband is one of the most powerful cocaine trafficking lawyers in Chicago, who just so happens to be in Los Angeles at the exact same time. And that's even admitted in Ronald Goldman in his father's book about him. What is it? His Name is Ron is the name of the book, and in it they refer to Lauren's father, who was one of his stepsisters, and that's Marvin Glass. Had made a planned trip to Los Angeles in June of 1994 to attend his daughter Lauren's middle school graduation. Just a few days, and again, this guy was on parole, most likely. I mean, so I mean, people had to know he was there. How did he even get access to this? So that's never explored.
And you also have,
and then you put in. Oh no, go ahead, Tim.
Supporting this theory of a drug connection would be that Ronald Goldman had two acquaintances or friends that were violently murdered the year before and the year after Goldman's death. One having his throat being cut from ear to ear. Too.
Yeah, that's probably one of the big. I think really when you if you want to understand what happened, the OJ case, you got to look into the drug side of this. That's really where all of the dots start to get connected. But yeah, so Ronald Goldman's friend and former boss, Brett Cantor, who ran a nightclub called the Dragonfly, that Ronald Goldman had worked at as a club promoter, and they all used to hang out there. So Goldman, Faye Resnick, Nicole, that whole group of friends, they all used to hang out. Brett Cantor knew them well. He's killed on July 30th, 1993, cut from behind, lower left side of the neck, sliced up and to the right. Exactly like Goldman. Also, just like Goldman, he was stabbed repeatedly in the arms and the chest. And the same type of knife, a long, thin blade. Now, along with that, you have a colleague of them who worked at Mezzaluna, which is this infamous restaurant. His car is torched, 1994, in Corona Del Mar. Now, a second friend's life is threatened at an Aspen nightclub. And there is an interesting Aspen, Colorado connection to a lot of these. Now, both of these guys have disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. Now, the other big one is Michael Nigg, who worked at Mezzaluna, was very close to Goldman. Mezzaluna, again, is the restaurant they all worked at. He's gunned down in Hollywood by unknown killers in September 1995. And according to authorities in Aspen, who were interviewed, Michael Nigg was involved in the drug scene there. So you've got Brett Cantor dying just before, or a year or so, just before Goldman is killed in the exact same way. Two of his friends disappear after, obviously, they've been threatened. And then you get Michael Nigg gunned down. And no one has ever solved Michael Nigg's crime. The cops claim it was robbery. Nothing. He wasn't robbed. Nothing was taken from him. Again, similar to the murders of Nicole and Ronald. Nothing is stolen. Nothing is bizarre. Now, if those two things don't kind of tickle your interest, there's also friends of OJ's, acquaintances of OJ's back from his days when he played football in Buffalo. So June 26, 1994. So again, just after the Nicole and Ronald are killed, this guy Casimir Butch Casey, his nickname, Shikarsky, who was an acquaintance of OJ's, is murdered down in Florida along with two other women. Sharon Anderson and Mary Rogers are their names. Now, he had moved to Buffalo from Florida in the 1980s. He was known as this big playboy. He was once caught, this guy, Shikarsky, when he was working in Buffalo and he ran in nightclubs and bars like that, he was caught in an official drug sting that was aimed at O.J. Simpson. He owned a bar in the 1970s that was frequented by O.J. The Buffalo News reported that not only were these bars important in the cocaine trade at the time, but that O.J. was connected to them. Michael Militello, who's a club owner, also in Buffalo, longtime friend of O.J.'s, described this was huge. This is, the whole scene was all about cocaine. And again, 1975, Shikarsky was staying with this guy, Militello, when police raided them, and the investigation was aimed at Militello and Simpson, who they believed was supplying drugs to pro athletes. So this guy is killed just after Nicole and Ronald are killed. So you get that whole thing. Then, of course, there's Joey Ippolito, who I think connects a lot of these different things all together, and he's a very infamous crime boss that was started out on the East Coast, later moved out to California and set up shop in Brentwood, right in the center where all of these guys were. And Joey Ippolito Jr. is, deeply connected with OJ. People will remember Al Cowlings. He was the guy, OJ's best friend who's driving the Bronco. Al Cowlings was an unofficial bodyguard for Joey Ippolito. Visited Ippolito when he was arrested. At one point, when Ippolito was busted, Al Cowlings was with him. There is of course, a really bizarre story. There's this woman, Tracy Alice Hill, who was a stripper. And sometimes she went by the name Amanda Armstrong, 32-year-old stripper. She was arrested in 95 out in North Hollywood. 40 pounds of cocaine and a vial of pills prescribed to Al Cowlings. Now, Al Cowlings' lawyer, Donald Rhee, who interestingly enough is a former partner of O.J. Simpson's original lawyer, Weitzman, denied any connection between Al Cowlings and the stripper. Even though the stripper's computerized address book had phone numbers for both O.J. and Al Cowlings. So, again, what's going on there? Why did any normal trial, right, when you've got these two victims brutally murdered, and you start to fan out and you start to look at people, associated with them, and you start to see there's a lot of bodies connected to these people, and a lot of them have to do with drugs and this sort of seedy underbelly of, Beverly Hills, Brentwood, this whole area. What's going on here? There are much larger questions at stake. And of course, none of this nobody, and again, Johnny Cochran, Carl Douglas, Shapiro, Dershowitz, of course, was involved in that case, Barry Scheck. Some of these people are still, reputable. They never touched the drug angle. And this was and this was acknowledged internally, through different people. Bill Pavlik, I believe, has said this. He was a private eye who did work for them. There's another private eye whose name I can't remember off the top of my head right now. He said, of course, everybody knew the whole case was about coke. And it was about the fact that Goldman and Nicole had gotten way in over their heads with somebody. And again, there were rumors floating around, some of them more credible than others, that somebody had squealed on Ippolito. And Ippolito was in prison. Now, in May 1994, so just a month before the murders, Ippolito walked away from his work detail and disappeared. Okay? So, again, you've got this major crime figure who's connected to OJ, at the very least, right? You've got all these other people getting bumped off left and right. Some of them in the exact same manner. Why was none of this investigated? And unfortunately, most of it goes back to the fact that Mark Fuhrman found a glove. And that was it. That was the end of the case. Once he found the glove. And again, people will be somewhat familiar with the Mark Fuhrman tapes. This is where he's, he uses the N-word about 42 times. He talks about starving all the people in Ethiopia, that they don't deserve to live. We shouldn't give them any food aid during a time when that was really bad. He talked about lining up all of the black members of the LA City Council and shooting them. There's a guy, again, drew swastikas on fellow officers' walls. In these tapes, he openly talks about planting evidence. All of these things. But one of the really interesting things, there is this series of taped interviews that Fuhrman gave over the course of about eight or 9 years. And they deal with him and the screenwriter by the name of Laura Hart McKinney, who was writing a screenplay about the LAPD, and particularly about the name of the screenplay was called Men Against Women. And MAW was an actual clandestine unit within the LAPD that Fuhrman was openly a member of. And they didn't like women in law enforcement, and they would do whatever they could to make sure that they wouldn't be around long within law enforcement. But and he told her all sorts of things, again, about planting evidence, about hating interracial couples, hating Mexicans, gay people, blacks, Chinese, everybody basically that wasn't a white Aryan Nazi. But towards the end, he was even talking to Laura Hart McKinney just before the trial started. And he is famously caught on tape talking about the importance of him and the fact that he is at the center of the trial of the century. And he said, it's all, I hold all the card, and I'm paraphrasing. But he basically says, without me, without the glove, bye-bye. The case is nothing. And again, this case ended the second that Fuhrman found these gloves. Then it turned into, it's OJ. It's all about OJ. And people will ask me sometimes about this sort of larger conspiracy. And something that Steven Singular talks about in his book, and we've talked about personally, is that the conspiracy, I think, was probably relatively small. And that a lot of this might have been not necessarily orchestrated, but, Fuhrman finds the gloves. Okay, well, sure, whatever. It's Simpson. Maybe he planted them, maybe he didn't, but we're going with this now. So then the case becomes, how do we make the gloves fit to this? So then, then we start seeing the blood being planted and things like that. But I'll stop talking to him because I realize I just went on and on.
Yeah, there really is a mountain of evidence, I think, exculpatory, at least regarding the murder for O.J. Simpson. He, I think, if you look at the evidence, he clearly did not commit the murders. But there's enough evidence to suggest that Simpson, A.C. Cowlings, Nicole Brown Simpson, Ronald Goldman, they're all involved in things that if you really are familiar with the seedy side of Hollywood and the sports scene, that isn't too surprising.
No,
it really, cocaine and these things, and these people aren't big players in the scene. They're just kind of, they're mid-level guys. They're facilitating giving drugs to friends, and because of their celebrity status, that they're given a certain level of protection. Mm-hmm. This same thing, same element might have been involved years before in the Manson killings. The Tate LaBianca killings. A lot of mob angle, drugs, weird sex, that sort of stuff. And the reason
and never investigated.
Never investigated, because to investigate it would have opened all this up and embarrassed a lot of people, maybe exposed intelligence operations, as we know. So break it down. Basically, what you're saying is, if you just focusing on Ronald Goldman, Nicole Brown Simpson. Ronald Goldman, young man, he's violently murdered, has his throat cut. He knows two people who, one has his throat cut, one is shot, all within 2 years. June 93 to what, December 95 is the time frame?
Yes.
What are the chances of 3 young men dying violent deaths, not being related?
Oh yeah.
So if you're a detective, you're going to go, oh, maybe we're going down the wrong path here. And it looks like a drug burn if you just look at it. Like I said, if you take O.J. Simpson out of the case, it's Brentwood, it's L.A., the whole scene, the whole nightclub scene. These are often distribution points for drugs, and the mob with his who's like the mob guy who walked away from his work detail again.
Joey Ippolito,
and he's tied to O.J. Simpson.
Oh, sure, without a doubt. I mean, that's like not even from the rumors that they used to play cards together to the fact that, Cowlings was definitely friends with it. He spoke at one of Joey Ippolito's probation hearings, Al Cowlings, saying that, oh, this guy's great, he helped me get off coke.
Yeah, so not only do you have police trying to frame an innocent man for the murders, they're ignoring, of course, the real perpetrators of the crime. What was the talk? I remember there's talk of it being when you get your throat cut. Is that a Colombian necklace?
Colombian necktie. Yeah,
necktie.
Cochran brought they floated that idea early in the trial, and then kind of just never talked about it again. And I think that was OJ saying you can't go there.
That's what it's. I think OJ. You can't go there. You're right. You can't use an affirmative defense because that opens up a can of worms, and you start threatening some powerful people and some big operations, perhaps. Because if you're familiar with the research of Gary Webb and the CIA and the crack cocaine abduction, how the cocaine was supplied by the CIA through Mena, Arkansas, one of the distribution points. This involves the Clintons. Again, another can of worms being opened up. It also opens up the perhaps intelligence operations inside the LAPD, and which go back at least as far back as the RFK assassination, probably way before that. But what's happening here is when you mentioned Furman's ties to this neo-Nazi,
the
order, and this got me thinking about, well, these groups are often, they exist. But they exist often as assets of intelligence operations to go around and stir trouble, create a strategy of tension, to deal in drugs that provides the funding for black ops. And also they can be mobilized at certain points. They can then be liquidated at certain points. There's certainly, if you investigate the Oklahoma City bombing case, it appears that's what occurred, because you had FBI, the Pat Kahn Patriot conspiracy.
Yeah, Pat Kahn.
And the investigations of Jesse Trentadue into the death of his brother, who was mistaken for John Guthrie, who was a member of this neo-Nazi group, who was supposedly identified as John Doe number 2.
Yeah, and it was Strassmeyer.
Yeah, Strassmeyer, who was this infiltrated Elohim City, which is a neo-Nazi group, white nationalist group, neo-Nazi group, which is fully infiltrated with FBI and CIA and German intelligence operations. And there's sometimes something like Oklahoma City, it might have been something where someone had a drill or a sting operation that was then co-opted or taken over by another element, which might explain why the FBI murdered Kenneth Trentadue, mistaking him for John Guthrie. See how convoluted these things can get?
Oh, well, again, people forget, but the OKC bombing took place during the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yes, that's right.
That was a huge, that I believe even the trial might have been stopped for a day when that happened. And the people within the order knew McVeigh. The order was famous for calling for the Day of Rope, which is it comes from a very popular neo-Nazi book which I can't remember. But it's all about this neo-Nazi revolution. The Day of Rope is when they kill all the Jews and the blacks and the Latinos and everybody.
The guy who wrote the Turner Diaries?
The Turner Diaries, yeah, exactly, right, yeah.
Wasn't he FBI?
He might have been. I'm not sure, but definitely,
Rockwell,
McVeigh.
Right? Was it Rockwell?
Oh yeah, what is
Rockwell was an FBI informant.
He might have been, yeah.
So, I mean, it's one of these things where I'm not saying these guys, they actually may believe this stuff and they're dangerous, but they're being utilized by the feds, and they're being made much more dangerous by the feds, because not only does it get it gets they're the ones that deal with the methamphetamine, the cocaine, mm-hmm. the marijuana, the pot that the mob and the intelligence agencies are involved in, but they also create the strategy of tension, right?
Yeah, I think that certainly when it comes to the McVeigh and OKC, I think there's just no doubt about it. That had to be some sort of joint FBI, CIA operation. And of course they were, people might remember, they were also wise enough to include, Muslims in the very beginning of that.
Yes, I tried to.
And that didn't really work. I think a lot of OKC was a sort of dry run for 9/11.
Yeah, because there was some question of involvement of like
Iraq, and
there was some Republican Guard alumnus, and that kind of, there was sort of like a paperclip operation bringing in Iraqi Republican Guard.
Yeah, and then that just didn't fly. So they went, of course. Oh yeah, it was the white nationalists. With the Furman thing, I don't know. I mean, he is a true believer. Yeah, he really believes, that we have to commit genocide and all these other things. But interestingly, he goes back to the Marines.
Yeah.
There's evidence that he was protected while in the Marine Corps from a cup. He's alleged to have marched a bunch of black soldiers so hard that one of them passed out and died. That he drew swastikas on black soldiers' lockers. There was I'd have to look through my notes. I can't remember her name. She called into a popular radio station during the trial, when the trial was going on, and she said that she was she gave her name only as Pauline. She called into a Denver radio station that was playing the trial live on the air. She claimed that she was the official Marine Corps typist for Furman's discharge hearing at Camp Pendleton out in California, and that Furman was accused of painting swastikas on black soldiers' lockers. He was accused of marching mostly black soldiers so hard that one of them died, and Pauline claimed that he was protected by superiors from a dishonorable discharge, and when Stephen Singular tried to access Furman's records, the National Personnel Research Center in St. Louis refused to release the file.
Huh. See, there's some sort of like higher up protecting him, and I think
definitely
at some level, I think at a meta level, there are people who may not have any affinity towards Nazi or KKK ideology, but they want to they want to empower these groups, so they actually go out and do commit real crimes and do violate civil rights of blacks, and there is police brutality, but that police brutality might factor into a dialectic that they're trying to create. Right.
I think there's a possibility for that, and I think it's just evidenced by the fact that the white power movement, the patriot movement, has basically all been infiltrated. The same way that the people say you can talk about the new Black Panthers. They're just all feds. Yeah. There is no they are not the Black Panther. I assure you, Huey Newton and others are rolling in their graves. If they could see what has become of their movement, which is just the new Black Panther Party is just there. They're just there to, to give Sean Hannity something to talk about.
Well, basically, yeah. So this guy Shabash shows up on Hannity and Combs and scares the heck out of white old ladies watching Sean Hannity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. With the Furman stuff, I know there are some theories that the neo-Nazi thing goes deeper. That the neo-Nazis might have been behind the killing of O.J. Simpson of Nicole as a way to get at O.J. I tend to kind of stray away from those theories.
Yeah.
Because I think it just sort of it misses the big elephant, which is drugs.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And that's the most solid one because there is actually quite a bit of documentable evidence.
Wasn't there also evidence of Goldman being tortured?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there. I mean, some of the cuts on his body are, they're superficial. They're like to make, it's like someone was cutting him in a way. It's just to hurt you.
Yeah.
There's some on his neck, some on his face, which suggests that someone was doing that to him for some reason. And again, that's happening, and possibly, if we go with the two knife scenario, there's another assailant holding Nicole. No one's screaming. So what's going on? Are they talking about something? Is like you said, is there more to that exactly? So yeah, I think anything that avoids the drug angle, I don't put a lot of credence into it. That being said, though, the Furman stuff is crazy in that this guy, I mean, now he's on Hannity every other day as some sort of expert on race relations. And he's like, oh no, the cops are good. It's really just as and he uses a lot of coded language. It's not fashionable for him anymore to use the N-word, in public, when he definitely was back in the day. So he uses a lot of coded language, but I think if there is something insidious going on, I think Furman is too stupid on a basic level. He's too arrogant to actually know what's going on if he's being played. And by the LAPD's own psychological evaluations of him talk about that he has these grandiose ideas, that he makes things up to make people feel bad for him, things like that. So I don't think he would be capable of being too deeply involved. But is he, the fact that he is now where he is and is unaffected by his legacy is really troubling. And the fact that he can, go back and listen to some of these tapes, or just listen, get the transcripts. He is a horrifying individual, and that he suffered nothing. If anything, he made money. He's written books about the, murder in Brentwood. He wrote. He's written other true crime. He is considered. He goes on Oprah. Like other. He's got people that you wouldn't in a million years think. How could you even be in the same room as this guy? So I think if there is something going on, like you said, strategy of tension, creating things like that. I do think that in a lot of ways. And I don't know how necessarily this was orchestrated or controlled, but definitely the OJ was the Simpson case was a test trial or a test case for, well, how far can the police go?
Yeah.
Now, can they be out and out Nazis, planting evidence? It came out during all this. Furman's beating confessions. He tortured people. They talked about executing people. Furman loved things like chokeholds, things of that nature. And this all comes out, basically. Now, even the fact that, he's planting evidence, there's evidence planted in this case, nothing happens. And then, we go all the way to now. It really doesn't, surprise me that there are vast swaths of the population, myself included, that don't trust the police. I know it's become very taboo in the alt media. Black Lives Matter is just got to all be about, Soros and the UN and stuff. And yes, is Soros funding them? I'm sure. He funds everybody. But at the core of that, the Black Lives Matter movement is in many ways an outgrowth of that. Because Furman set the standard. You can lie, steal, cheat, kill, be a racist, all of these things on camera. This is the most viewed, studied case on the planet. And the police were, without a doubt, lying through their teeth about everything. So was the prosecution. Marcia Clark and Christopher, they knew he was a racist, and they still put him on the stand. That whole, the whole when F. Lee Bailey is, did you ever use the N word? Blah blah blah. They knew for a fact that Furman was perjuring himself, but nothing really. What happens? He gets off scot free, and OJ is still considered the guilty one. So these protest movements like BLM, I mean, there's something there, I mean, like the cops are corrupt, and it's not just towards minority groups. That's just they might be more focused on them right now, but it is about everybody. There's no escaping it.
Years ago, Dr. Louis Jolyon West, MK Ultra doctor,
sure,
he said one of the advantages of the drug war was you could target certain groups.
Yeah,
and they used the law as sort of Damocles to hang above their head and clamp down on them. At the same time, you can use drugs to disrupt society, through the use of drugs, same way that the British did with opium in China. So it's a multifaceted weapon you can use against these groups. If you doubt this type of corruption was involved in the O.J. Simpson trial, and I don't see how, if you look at the evidence, you cannot help but come to that. How you can come to any other conclusion? A few years later, there was the Rampart scandal.
yeah.
Which ratified everyone's suspicion about the level of abuse, planting evidence, beating confessions out of witnesses, and these things. But these are people who have no money, so they can't hire lawyers. They can't marshal a meaningful defense, so they all go to prison. They all get convicted.
Thousands of men.
Thousands.
Innocent too.
Yeah, many of them. Yeah, I would say we have to presume that they're innocent.
Right.
They're just.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, no. Some of them definitely. Yeah, I'm sure they set up drug dealers, but some of them were truly just random people. I mean, that's a Furman was again during the trial. The LAPD settled a case for like several hundreds of thousands of dollars for a guy that Furman planted a knife on after he beat him. But the Rampart one is huge, and again, that was a drug unit.
Yeah.
So that drugs always manage to kind of pop into these things.
And I think it was with the Gary Webb story with the cocaine that was being shipped into L.A. This was facilitated by Danielle Blandon, who was a CIA agent, who was, I guess, trafficking it towards Freeway Ricky Ross, who was the crack kingpin in L.A. at the time. But I recall a lot of the money was being laundered through Death Row Records.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Sure.
Which
and Suge Knight was hiring. Suge Knight for Tupac hired basically FBI informants and ex-cops.
Yeah.
To be his security. So no surprise. I think Suge Knight is. There's a great what's John Podash has written about particularly the Tupac murder and that. But he through his research. I mean, Tupac has there's a whole section of Tupac's FBI file that's censored by the CIA. Because of national security or some
national security Tupac.
Like
okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Suge Knight was low on the totem pole, but certainly was definitely involved in coke trafficking and the again laundering money through a record company or a movie company to go all the way back to the beginning. Talking about that's super easy. Who's gonna look?
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially early 90s when rap started to explode. There was a lot of money going around. No one's looking too closely at that sort of stuff.
Apparently, half the budget in the Blues Brothers movie was cocaine proceeds. Half the budget. It was.
Yeah. I think that especially back then, early '80s. I mean, I'm sure a lot of those movies were.
But a lot of these groups that are meant to disrupt and scare the hell out of the white middle class, and you can agitate, you can create these conditions in these neighborhoods which cause the reaction. You also plant agent provocateurs in these groups and cause a riot. Then you film the riot that scares the white middle class, which justifies the police brutality. So there's a loop. There's almost like a dialectic going on here. But yeah, I mean, just in the past, if you consider the Symbionese Liberation Army, which I think if you do look, that was a creation of some cooperation with.
Abe Russell wrote about a lot of that.
Colton Westbrook and how they I guess Donald DeFreeze was
Donald DeFreeze. Yeah, it was trained while in prison. In my
well, look at I mentioned before, Charles Manson was in Vacaville prison, and he spent most of his life in these facilities that ties to MK Ultra.
Yeah, that's where he became a Scientologist.
Yeah, and of course, Scientology itself, some people view as an intelligence operation. At least it can be used as that, because the whole thing with auditing, and it can go into other countries. That's why Russia recently kicked him out, because they saw it as a.
They at one point, I mean, Hubbard tried to make Morocco the Scientology and Hubbard were very involved in the Moroccan coup d'état. It took place overthrew one of the kings of Morocco.
Yeah,
and it's alleged. I mean, they had Morocco secret, police were using e-meters to interrogate people.
Yeah. And of course, not just Scientology or cults, which can be used, but also just missionary work. I mean, look at the particularly in Latin America, the Protestant missionaries in Latin America, were linked to, of course, to Jim Jones, that operation, and that had all the makings of a intelligence operation. Of course, right after he's allegedly killed. You have the murders in San Francisco with Moscone and Harvey Milk, which looks like a cleanup operation.
Oh, well, they only got elected because of Jim Jones.
Yeah, exactly. And he was a big power broker, and he brought out the votes. And Jim Jones was able to secure welfare funding even after he took him down there, which is against the law. And they got I think they got $30,000 a month or something.
Well, Moscone appointed Jones to be the head of the
housing
and urban development in San Francisco.
Yeah. And overseas you have also the missionary work in China, which Yale in China, which of course educated Mao. So Mao was a Yalie. So these groups,
World Vision.
Yeah, well, World Vision, and that connects to the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt and the death of John Lennon, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And the Bushes, right? So because the head of World Vision was a good friend, was what's his name's father.
The guy who shot Reagan.
Yeah.
God, not Chapman, but
the other guy.
Hinckley.
He's the head of World Vision, or at least on the board of World Vision. And of course, Chapman was worked for World Vision.
Yeah.
So I mean, these groups, whether there's missionary groups, cults, neo-Nazi groups, they're all infiltrated and utilized by other power or greater powers to achieve some sort of objective, whether it's a strategy of tension, psyop, or just drug running and raising hell.
Well, there's a bunch of weird Scientology connections to the O.J. Simpson trial as well, which I don't think have too much to do with figuring out the trial. I think it really just demonstrates how interconnected Scientology is to Hollywood, the elite. But Marcia Clark was married to a Scientologist, and what was it? The guy. So she was married to a Scientologist. People will know that from the FX show. The guy that she's arguing with over custody rights, he's a Scientologist. And Marcia Clark went, audited and things, did things like that. May have even still been a Scientologist during part of the trial. But what is it? The guy who married Marcia Clark and her husband, who was he's one of these fake Scientology ministers who's allowed to marry people. He accidentally shot Marcia Clark's first husband in the face and killed him. And her first husband was a famous backgammon player who allegedly was in a poker game with O.J. Simpson, one of O.J.'s many high-stakes poker games. Anyway, so Marcia Clark, the priest that married Clark, kills her first husband, and he gets off on that, and his lawyer is, of course, Robert Shapiro, who would become O.J.'s lawyer. And even more bizarre, Robert Shapiro is, of course, portrayed by John Travolta, who's a big Scientologist in the FX show. So I know a lot of people love the Scientology, and I love Scientology. That was probably before I researched anything. Back when I was early in high school, I was very big Scientology watcher. But I don't think there's anything too much with the Scientology and OJ, other than it's just, of course, only in Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, it's a small town, right? So.
Yeah.
And of course, with the OJ trial, reason why we're cursed with the Kardashians is because of the OJ trial. So.
Oh yeah, that's actually the worst legacy, perhaps. Forget the racism and police brutality. Yeah, no, I mean there would be no Kardashians. With that, well, and I mean not to get too gossipy on your fine podcast, but there are all these rumors that OJ is about to take a paternity test to see if he's actually the father of Kourtney or Khloe, Kourtney Kardashian. So, which is not even that far fetched.
Which connects us to Caitlyn Jenner.
Well, Caitlyn Jenner. Well, no, it's funny you mentioned that because again, very close friend of OJ's, and I can't remember who it is. Ed Opperman would know this. He always brings it up. There is a divorce proceeding. One of their friends that they were all in their circle of friends had a divorce proceeding, and it's a fairly famous person. In those court documents, she talks about Jenner, OJ, all of them snorting up coke like it's gone out of style. So, Jenner definitely involved in I mean, that's the thing. All of these people knew. They all knew the level to which the drug use was going on and this sort of very dangerous lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, it's sort of like one of these open secrets. They all knew. I mean, Faye Resnick is calling Nicole from rehab. She's freebasing thousands of dollars of coke a day, and she's calling from rehab. Now, according to Faye Resnick on that phone call, it's all happy-go-lucky. They're going to start their restaurant, and a lot of this, the killing might have been involved over money that they were trying to run their own Mezzaluna, their own drug front. But according to Faye Resnick, it's all smiles and giggles. Whereas Nicole's daughter, she tells the police, I heard mommy crying and screaming at her best friend. So what was that phone call really about?
Yeah. And I guess it was, I heard that Ronald Goldman might have been a courier.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Definitely. I think there's a lot. Well, that's the whole thing. Is you've got this hip Beverly Hills restaurant, and again, Mezzaluna, especially back then, it's a cash business.
Yes.
So it's very, very good for any kind of front. It doesn't have to just be drugs, but drug fronts love things like a cash business. You've got these restaurants. You've got people. I mean, Ippolito, by his own admission. When he moved out to Brentwood, he set up his own restaurants, and he one of them, a big one. I'm not sure if it was in Brentwood or Beverly Hills. Santani is an Italian restaurant that OJ frequented, Al Cowlings, Nicole, all of them. That's where he distributed his cocaine out of the restaurant. So yeah, I mean, so again, then it's very sad, but Goldman is also this aspiring actor, and he wants to be a model. Very easy. Someone like that, you go to Hollywood, you get mixed up in cocaine. There's evidence of pornography as well. It's very, very, again, this is seedy underworld, and they're all kind of celebrity. OJ's famous. Al Cowlings is famous for being friends of OJ. Kato again, Kato Kaelin is this sort of, became famous, but was just sort of made famous by this. He was another actor. A lot of these sort of weird celebrities sort of all floating around there. Again, at the time, Bruce Jenner was Olympic medalist, all that kind of shit. So they're all kind of famous. It's very easy, I think, for them you can fall into that world. And then you can get in very, very deep very quickly. And I think that's probably what happened here. But that doesn't fit into, a CNN story about Othello. Come real.
Yeah. A crazy black guy jealous of his wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, with Bruce Jenner, from what I understand, his hometown is Newtown, Connecticut. So
is it?
Make of that what you will.
Oh God. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to touch that tonight.
So his whole career is like an unfolding drama.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
from alpha male to whatever. And of course he's back on the cover of Sports Illustrated, which gets us back to Time Life.
Mm.
We mentioned earlier, and that's
and he's one of Trump's biggest supporters.
Yeah.
So, you kind of get it all with the extended Kardashian family.
So I think, and the other thing, I think we kind of covered it all, right, with the OJ case. All the and problems, and it really is, like you said, it's amazing that a case can be that weak. But really, the jury, 3 hours, and they acquitted.
Yeah, that's why. So that's why. I mean, we barely scratched the surface. We talked about OJ for an hour?
Yeah.
They spent months in that courtroom, and there's a lot more evidence. There's a lot. I urge everybody to get a copy of Steven Singular's book, Legacy of Deception. He's got a new updated version. It's an ebook, so you find on Kindle. It's like, I don't know, like $7 or something on Amazon, updated with all new information, lots of stuff that he's got lots more footnotes now, all the stuff that happened after the trial, years later. Really encourage it. That's the best place to start, because, and again, Stephen was involved he was in the center of this case, and he knew he knew Cochran, he knew Carl Douglas, he talked with Darden, he knew a lot of the PIs around there. So start there, but once people read that and you look at it with an open mind, there's so many avenues and angles to this case that we could. There's a lot more other great books. Donald Freed's written a book, Killing Time, very good. T.H. Johnson's book, Pursuit of Exhibit 35, very good. But I always say, start with Legacy of Deception, because that's the basics. That's the EDTA, that's the planted evidence, the racism, all the, it's a great, if you only read one book on OJ, definitely make it Steven Singular's Legacy of Deception.
Yeah, if you stand back and ignore all the propaganda that came out during the trial and after, Ronald Goldman, confidential informant, linked to cocaine, same with Nicole and her friend Frey Resnick. They both died. They get Colombian neckties.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a drug burn. It really does.
The whole thing? Oh, yeah. And then the OJ's friends getting bumped off.
Yeah.
And before, during, and after the murders. So, right, that's the bit. Me and Steven have talked about this before. Any other case, I don't care who the hell you are, any other case, those things would have been investigated. Mm-hmm. They would have questioned somebody about it. But when it came to this, no. It was off limits.
I think it's because if they investigate the drugs, drugs are so... They play such a vital role in so many things, the nation's economy, the banking system, Wall Street, that it has to be protected. That's where Doug Valentine, the researching these things, he's talked about a book called Strength of the Wolf and Strength of the Pack, about the Bureau of Narcotics, and then the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs morphed in the DEA. And why the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs had to be shut down is because every time they went after a big drug dealer, they came up against the CIA.
Yeah.
And shut it down. And that's what we're dealing with. I think that's what we're dealing with. Now, one thing, Porkins Policy Review, PorkinsPolicyReview.com, you have a number of ways that your work can be supported. And can you want to go through that real fast?
Sure, yeah. So obviously, you can support the work just by listening to the show, and you can find it on PorkinsPolicyReview.com. But if anyone out there wants to help donate, I really encourage that. You can of course just send me a simple donation on PayPal. You can find that on my website, but I also do Patreon as well, which is a great service. It's a subscription-based service. So for as little as $1 a month, you can support Porkins Policy Review. And you can also support Porkins Great Game as well. We have a Patreon for that as well, and that's episode by episode. So you'll only be charged when we put out an episode. But yeah, I offer, I answer questions. I just answered a question recently, an episode that'll be up all about OJ. So you can support, and again, if you like the CIA in Hollywood, definitely come support me on Patreon. You can also support Tom. Tom Secker's got his own Patreon, so and that's fine. If you want to donate to Tom instead of me, that's totally cool, because we always work together anyway. So
yeah.
And I just quickly just want to mention starting this coming Tuesday and every subsequent Tuesday from 1 to 3 Pacific and 4 to 6 Eastern, I'm going to be hosting a live radio show on American Freedom Radio.
Oh,
so that's another great way to hear me, and I'll definitely be talking about OJ and Epstein, a lot of the other stuff I've been covering. So yeah, those are all the ways to support me. And again, as I said, just listening is a great way to support.
And it's just a few bucks a month. And again, if you forego a coffee or maybe perhaps even cut off your cable TV bill.
No, as little $1 a month is huge, you know. Yeah. And obviously you donate more than that. You can donate one time too, you know. If you do $1 a year if that's all you can afford.
Yeah.
But $1 a month really isn't that much at all.
Because all the time and research you put into your work, none of this is free. Because time is probably the only non-renewable resource.
Yeah.
The opportunity cost and just the amount of research that this work requires. If you support work like yours and Tom's and other people as well, I whether it's James Corbett or Jay Dyer, and you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that these people say, but you get a quality of research and insight into into history, into current affairs that you're not going to find in academia, you're not going to find in the mainstream media, you're not going to find by reading a newspaper.
You're not going to find it in a lot of alt media.
No, you're not. And so it is. It's and listen to I listened to it for a while, and send a few bucks these people's way when if you get something out of it, because these people have to eat too. So send the money so you can buy an air conditioner.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I am actually sitting here in a pool of sweat, and I actually had to take my shorts off halfway through the interview, so I'm in my underwear right now.
Oh, whoa, okay. So let's close it out so we can turn your fans back on. I'm gonna go turn my AC down to 64. No, that would drive my wife crazy. But great. Okay, listen, thanks for spending so much time with me tonight.
Oh, absolutely, Tim. Thank you so much. I'd love to come back on anytime.
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll I'll contact you and see what you talk about, what issues come up. You're a great resource for this stuff. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Good night then. Thanks.